how to actually make money in a bull market, the survival guide, the wins, the lessons, everything I've learned of investing in crypto over the last 8 years, I want to share with you in today's video because we're in such an interesting spot with the market being down, most altcoins down 20 to 50%, Bitcoin's in a bit of a lull period, but this is what we've been saying for such a long time leading up to the Bitcoin halving that we're looking for a narrative, what's going to be the next best thing, what are the altcoins to look into. I'm going to share with you all of that in today's video so you can come out in the back end of this video with a bit more of a structured plan, a better understanding of where we're at, and a better understanding where you can actually deploy some of your cash and some of the crypto you have right now to maybe re-strategize, rethink your portfolio to really take advantage of the back half of this year in this video. So if you're new to the channel, would love for you to leave a subscribe. I'm new to creating YouTube videos, but I've been doing this for about 8 years, investing full-time in crypto. I run Australia's largest crypto research company, Collective Shift. We work with over 1,000 paying members around the world, and I'm trying to do more videos like this because the feedback's been get on front of camera and start doing more videos. So if you like these videos, would love for you to share a bit of feedback and make sure to leave a subscribe. So we're in a bit of an interesting spot in the market right now. We're sort of in this correction, sort of lull period, and I've sort of got up this morning and really realized that sentiment really has started to drop off. I mean, I looked at the fear and greed index as of this morning. It's still saying about 60% greed, which I kind of disagree with. I think Bitcoin's sort of in this period where we're sort of chopping sideways a little bit from the recent highs where we got around the middle of March to where we are now. Bitcoin's down about 12%. We got as low as about 18 or 19% with Bitcoin, but some of the altcoins have really taken a bit of a hit. Now, we've had a small bounce, but really what we're seeing at the moment is really a lack of narrative. Like the market has been pushing towards the Bitcoin halving event for so long, and it's actually what happened in the 2020 Bitcoin halving is once we hit that event for the weeks and probably the next 2 months, the market really didn't know what to do. So even if we look at Solana from an all-time high perspective down to where we are now, sorry, this is market cap. If we go to Solana, we're seeing a lot of these altcoins just really haven't hit any sort of, I guess, bottom. Like I think altcoins potentially have a little way further to go down. I mean, the bottom of the recent local bottom was down about 40% in the last couple of months. But if we really zoom out, we've got to remember we've come on such a huge run. I mean, some of these altcoins were down, 70, 80% from their sort of multi-year lows, running up as high as, multiple hundreds of percent. Like Solana did about 150% from its sort of yearly lows. So look, we've got to keep things in perspective, and the Bitcoin and crypto market have run up for about 7 months straight of green candles, which you very rarely see in the crypto space. But I want to share with you at the back end of this video some of the altcoins I'm looking at deploying probably in the next couple of weeks. I share our investments live with our members, but I'll share with you just what I'm thinking, and then if you want to really know exactly when and what entry points we're investing, I do that over with our membership. But I'm going to share with you some of those thoughts today. I guess what the first chart I really wanted to share with you, just to remind you of how the last Bitcoin halving played out, was that we had sort of this correction period after the 2020 Bitcoin halving of, as I said, probably about 2 to 4 months. And this was really the market just getting a general feel of where it's at. We had obviously a reduction in supply. We had a lot of momentum coming up into this Bitcoin halving. Probably in February, March, Bitcoin ran from 40,000 to 60,000 in just a matter of weeks. Then we had a pretty nice correction, and right now we're sort of in this choppiness stage, which can be the hardest to buy. A lot of you are probably thinking, Bitcoin's quite boring, crypto's quite boring, starting to get quite negative. I think sentiment across the board, social media. It's interesting. I see, online people getting angry when their portfolio's down. They start blaming other people. They start thinking that the opportunity is over, but it's really not the case. If you look at this chart here, this was the previous bull market from the lows. Back in COVID of about 4,000, we ran up to 64,000. It was a huge bull market back in 2021. But we had 10% plus drawdowns. And if you've been listening to my content or you follow me for a little while, I really talk about these opportunities as really being game changing. And when the market zigs, you need to zag. And when most people right now are feeling bearish, they're feeling a little bit depressive, their portfolio is probably down 30, 40, 50%, depending on how many altcoins they have in their portfolio. These are really the times to accumulate. If you've got cash on the sidelines, accumulate, or if you don't have any cash on the sidelines, really just step away from the screen. I think that's what a lot of people are doing. But if you can reallocate, if you can deploy and build up some of those altcoin positions, I really do think these periods right now are a great time to accumulate. Not to say we don't go down further. I think we could continue to bleed over the next month or two. But from a multi-year perspective, I think, or this bull market perspective, I think we've got some really good entry points in some of the altcoins. Now we can see here the US spot Bitcoin ETF has really died off since about the first week of April. We've really barely seen any inflows. We've got to remember, guys, that the ETF, these institutions, and some of them are individuals buying from their brokerage accounts, act the same as retail, all right? They are not unhuman. They're going to act with the market, they're going to get FOMO, and they're going to react based on what the rest of the market's doing. I think, again, we've got to remember that where I've made the most of my money and where I've learnt the most in previous bull markets, like where I've actually made a lot of my money, is investing in these assets when no one's talking about it or the narratives aren't there or when people have really given up. And I think that is very hard to do in a bear market when really from a multi-year perspective, no one's really talking about crypto. But in these shorter term timeframes, when we get these pullbacks in bull markets, these are historically amazing times to buy. Now, if we look at the correction drawdowns, this bull market compared to previous is still sort of nearly ant size in comparison to the previous drawdown. So you see these prices here. This was the 2011 bull market, 2012, 2015, 17, 2020, and the most recent one. The drawdowns are nowhere near where we've realized in previous bull markets. I mean, back in the 2020 bull market, we had about a 60% correction, leading up into that sort of second phase of the bull market. Right now, Bitcoin's gone down maybe 20% at best. Yes, altcoins are bleeding a little bit more, but I just want to urge that this is very normal. Like fundamentally, nothing has changed for crypto right now. We've got a lot of good stuff happening with the Ethereum ETF, the tokenized fund on BlackRock. We've got Bitcoin starting to be seen as this risk-off asset and people starting to allocate. But we do have a lot of news in the world right now that aren't very favorable. We've got the rates decision coming out on May 1st, which would be interesting to see what they do with rates. We think they're going to hold steady, especially with the awful stuff that's happening in the Middle East at the moment with the war. Like that's not great for markets either. There's a lot of sort of and even DeFi with the SEC, putting in the Wells notice against Uniswap. Like there's a lot of catalysts from a news perspective to not really drive sentiment, and there really isn't that next narrative to grab onto at the moment in the market. And that's where finding these entry points and understanding entries and exits, which I know a lot of you want to think about, and that's what we work a lot at Collective Shift is those exit strategies, portfolio allocation. I like to use a mix of different analysis styles. I think a lot of influencers that you might follow might have one or maybe two different analysis styles where they're just a TA expert or they just do fundamental analysis, for example. At Collective Shift, we have a team of 5 analysts, and we like to look at the different perspectives of the market where we can overlay on-chain, overlay fundamental analysis, sentiment, and technicals to get some sort of opinion. And really, from our perspective in the short term, with those different analytical, viewpoints, I really do think the next couple of months could be quite choppy. I said this in my last video, and I mentioned it. I had an interview with Cointelegraph pre-halving that you can go and have a look at, which was that I did expect a sell-off post-Bitcoin halving. It's what happened back when the ETF happened, and I do expect that these are actually great buying opportunities, great accumulation points, which I'll speak about in a second. But I'm a big believer in DeFi. I think DeFi is a great sector. That's been bled even further, I think, because of the SEC lawsuit against Uniswap Labs. As I mentioned, we've got the spot ETH ETF application coming up. I'm not overly confident that that's going to get approved. And we've also got the rates decision coming up on May 1st. There's a lot of moving pieces in the world right now that aren't huge catalysts for Bitcoin driving up. But I wanted to mention, like in the last 2 cycles ago, how I grew my portfolio to over $1 million. And that was just purely from having conviction and making sure I doubled down in these moments. Like these moments when crypto seems sort of boring and people have sort of forgotten about it and walked away. These consolidation points are just amazing times to build your portfolio. And, in the past I've had, when I haven't made as much money as what I could have, I had 20, 30, 40 different altcoins. I had spread across different things. I was across different chains. I had different wallets. And it's quite hard to build a substantial portfolio, I find, when you have such a thin spread of different altcoins. What I've now done is I've really consolidated, 2 cycles ago, I consolidated down to less than 10 tokens. And I have a lot of conviction in those tokens. And I've really been able to add quite a substantial amount of capital into each of those altcoins to ensure that if I am right, and I have been right so many times, that I can actually return at I guess not necessarily always life-changing, but a good amount of returns on those individual investments. And what I mean by that is, yes, I get things wrong, but in the past, I've looked back and gone, man, I've been right so many times, but I haven't backed myself to have enough capital in each of those investments to make sure that when those things do turn into 2, 5, 10x, that it's really changing the lens of my portfolio growth. Where if you have a small amount in 20, 30, 40 coins, you might get those ones that, do 5 or 10x returns, but you might also have 5 to 10 that don't perform that well. And over time, the difference between having a higher percentage allocation or a high dollar value in a smaller amount of coins versus a lower amount into more coins really outweighs, in future performance. If you have that conviction, you can back yourself on those, lesser amount or lesser volume of coins. And also when it comes to selling, it becomes so much easier to create an exit strategy when you know what each of those coins do. I speak to a lot of our members, and especially our platinum members that come in, and they don't, the biggest issue that they have is they don't know when to exit. They have a large portfolio, and we sit down and we sort of work through what exit strategies look like. But it can be very difficult if you have a lot of coins, especially if you're barreling into meme coins and you have sort of that degen fund, which again, from a portfolio allocation perspective, I didn't make money on meme coins or highly speculative coins. I've always tried to back good fundamental projects, and I've always had a large amount of Bitcoin and ETH in my portfolio at all times. I think that's a big mistake a lot of people make, is they go too far down the risk curve when things get frothy. And perhaps for a lot of you, you've barreled into your altcoins, you've barreled into meme coins at the height of the mania. And yes, I think those meme coins will come back over the long term. We definitely had a local top, but your portfolio is probably bleeding right now. And it can be quite painful to look at that and see your portfolio down 40, 50, 60%. I was even speaking to a platinum client today that has put a large sum of money, over $1 million US, into a crypto fund, and even they had less than 25% allocated to Bitcoin and ETH. They had 75% allocated to altcoins. So they've been underperforming for the last 2 or 3 years. They've been underwater, and I think that's primarily due to an over allocation to altcoins. Like, I'm a big believer you can make a lot of money in altcoins, but I'm also a big believer in Bitcoin and Ethereum being the meat and potatoes of your altcoin, of your portfolio. I really think you should be holding at least 50% in Bitcoin and ETH to really level out that volatility. And at the end of the day, the more risk that you want, the higher your altcoin allocation, but also the higher the volatility and the bigger the drawdowns you'll have in these periods of time. Where if you're stacking predominantly Bitcoin and ETH during those run-ups, and then in these corrections, you can add cash into the altcoins like I'm about to do, I think that is a better risk to reward strategy. I own a lot of Ethereum, and I think Ethereum's potentially underperformed up into this point, but holding a lot of BTC and ETH allows me to be a bit more secure, and I feel a little bit more protected during these corrections. And the cash I do have on the sidelines, I can now deploy into some of those altcoins that are down 30, 40, 50% and get a good entry, if that makes sense. So I want to share with you a little bit of 5 or 6 altcoins that I'm looking at, and I'll get to those in a second. I just wanted to touch on, just before I forget though, is just be really aware of those peak moments of euphoria. We really felt that probably in middle of March leading up to the Bitcoin halving, when everything's crazy, everything's exciting, and hindsight's 2020. But remember those feelings when the market's going absolutely bananas, everyone's making money, the media's talking about. That's the feeling that you're going to feel, but even greater at the peak of this bull market. And again, back to the different analysis types that we use at Collective Shift to help us with navigating when the top of the cycle will be. If we look at the fear and greed index, we look at sentiment, we look at things like on-chain analysis, like the MV/RV ratio, we're looking at like when wallets are starting to rotate out. All of that is very helpful, but at the end of the day, it's really back down to human emotion and human psychology. And I think if you can really get a grasp of that feeling that you feel in the euphoria, that is usually the right time to start taking profits. I didn't take profits in the last couple of months because I feel as though we're still probably about 40 or 50% of the way through this bull market. I think we have a long way to go. I think what's going to push us into those new territories and get back to those positions is Bitcoin continue to grind up. I think over the next couple of months, the market economics of the lower supply will start to come into play. People start to buy again once we get through the rate decisions, maybe once we get a little bit more understanding of the war and how that's playing out. But I think Bitcoin will grind towards that sort of 70, 80. It will break all-time highs again. We'll get a little bit more narrative. We'll push to that $100,000 mark perhaps later this year. And I think once we break through that $100,000 mark USD, we'll start to get the retail investors come back in. We'll start to get that narrative that Bitcoin isn't dead, and people will start to look for those alternative coins. What are those coins that aren't as expensive as Bitcoin? That we know how retail act. They don't like to buy the expensive coins. And that's where having a good altcoin allocation can grow our entire portfolio from like a leveraged BTC or ETH position, and at the peak of that cycle try and sell down. And for me, I'm going to try and really stack Bitcoin for the long period of time. For those that know me, I'm trying to buy a home for my parents. I want to diversify at the top of this cycle. Like most of my wealth, 99% of my wealth is in crypto right now. The goal for me is to sell down probably 40 to 60% of my entire portfolio and diversify into property and equities and a few other things. But for the remaining 40%, I'm going to sell down pretty much all of my altcoin positions. Altcoins generally underperform Bitcoin 99% of the time. Bitcoin will outperform in a bear market, and they want to hold Bitcoin for a long period of time. I'm really trying to build a long-term Bitcoin stack for the next 20, 30 years. I think Bitcoin's going to outperform everything, and over time, the Bitcoin stack for me is going to be something I want to hold through the next bear market, bull market. I don't really care. And with the cash and the diversification I've been able to create during the sell-off of this peak of this cycle with those altcoins, reallocate and buy back in at the next cycle. So just want to quickly share with you some of the altcoins I'm looking at the moment. Solana, I've got a good position in Solana. I'm going to probably be looking to add to this very soon. I think Solana, as I mentioned just before, is about sort of that 35% down in a pretty good re-entry point here. Historically, altcoins will correct 30 to 50% during bull markets. So not to say we don't have another sell-off, but if we're looking at a multi-month period over the future, I think we've got a really good entry point here. I'm still super bullish on Solana. We've got a lot of the momentum coming out of its crisis back in 2022. Sorry, a lot of meme coins being built on Solana, a lot of developers, a lot of activity, a lot of fees being generated on the network. It's still having a few problems with the chain, but ultimately, I'm a big ETH fan, and I think Solana is a good hedge against Ethereum in this next bull market. Maker's an interesting one. Maker's been around. It's an old horse. It's been around for a long time. It's going through a token upgrade at the moment that should be coming out, I think, in the next few weeks. The token upgrade has a range of different things, basically bringing a lot of the economics and different things they had going on together. And I really think that's going to drive a lot of additional value and utility to the token, as well as they're doing a token split, which will bring the ratio down to about 15 cents post-token split. I know that doesn't make any fundamental difference to the token, but psychologically for retail investors, I do believe that is quite an important narrative. If you look at something like XRP, for example, which I'm not a big fan of, psychologically, a low price of a token is what attracts retail investors in a bull market. So there, Maker's down about 30%, a pretty good entry point for me as well there. Ronin, big fan of gaming. I think gaming is going to be a big sector for this year and next year and beyond, but it is very hard to back the individual game and token that's going to actually perform well. I mean, I'm not a big gaming player myself, and I wouldn't back myself to really understand which games are going to win. But I also know that games don't have a very long life cycle either, like unless it's like an NBA game or an NHL game or a Call of Duty that's got a really good brand. A lot of these games sort of come and go, and I feel as though backing the blockchain from a fundamental perspective gives a lot more utility and value and longevity over my investments, and it also diversifies my risk of not just having to back one individual project. I can back a blockchain like Ronin that is focused on building a layer or infrastructure for gaming projects that let's say one gaming project kicks off or two or three. I'm going to get all that exposure on the Ronin blockchain. So pretty excited about Ronin. I think that's going to perform hopefully pretty well over the next couple of years. Ethereum, I think Ethereum still is one of the best risk to reward plays right now. We've got the potential upcoming ETH ETF. We've got the BlackRock tokenized fund. We've got a lot of just good network effects. And I really think Ethereum will come back into the spotlight later this year. Now that Bitcoin has had a lot of the spotlight with the Bitcoin halving, I think Ethereum's going to come back. And I've got a large position in ETH for this year and beyond. I think ETH's going to perform really well. And hopefully some of the layer twos as well. I own Polygon. It's really underperformed. But I think the networking and the upgrade that we've recently gone through with ETH, with the Dan Kahn upgrade, is going to really help out and continue to strengthen the network. Maple, if you've been following me for a little while, Maple's a fan of. Maple is one of my favorite projects. Biggest headwind with Maple right now is it's a DeFi project, and I made a pretty big entry at about $5.50. We recently ran to about $30. It's now down to about $12, I think. Recently with the SEC, World's Notice with Uniswap. I love Maple. I think it's a great project, but ultimately we are currently in a bit of a crossroads with the SEC. So until we get out of the headwinds of the SEC and Uniswap gets some sort of, regulatory clarity, I think DeFi is going to continue to probably underperform in the short term. But still, for the long term, I am quite bullish. Probably won't be adding to the Maple position until we get a little bit more clarity from the SEC, though, as it could continue to go down further. And last but not least, this is a very risky, high-risk token. I Transparent. Sorry, I forgot to mention I do own all these tokens. Full transparency. Very risky token, DMT. It's a lower cap token. It's a new narrative that's kind of being built around layer 3s at the moment. Fundamentally, I'm really excited about the tokenomics. They're building basically a Web3 Twitch, and they're starting to grow in terms of content creator and also audience levels. And the token is a really cool reward mechanism. They've got some nice token burn mechanics. They are bootstrapped, but ultimately a very low cap coin, 99% chance this thing doesn't play out. So please be careful, super high risk, but one I wanted to mention anyway in terms of a narrative that I think reminded me of actually the early metaverse days when I invested heavily in the metaverse back in sort of 2018, 2019, before the metaverse was really a thing. I really sensed that similar narrative with layer 3 and DMT. The Sanko game itself kind of reminded me of that. So that's why I've had a bit of a throw at the stumps there on DMT. Now that basically concludes from an altcoin position where I'm looking at. I just wanted you all to just really be aware of like your psychology when going through this bull market, and ultimately understanding when it feels the hardest to buy, that usually is the right time to buy, and when it feels the hardest to sell, that usually is the right time to sell. And I'll do some more videos on exit strategy and timing when we come into the market. But really understand your psychology. Think about and document how you felt in the middle of March when things were getting euphoric, and think about how you're feeling now. This is only going to be leveraged and exacerbated in a bull market. And ultimately, the biggest competitor that you have to making money in a bull market is your own head. This is why 90% of people don't make any money, because they get ahead of themselves. They don't sell. They think it's going to go up forever, and they round trip the market. So I really want you to make sure you're taking profits this cycle, get your strategy in order, get your plan together, and make sure you're having a good fundamental, portfolio of Bitcoin and ETH. Don't overexpose yourself on altcoins and meme coins when the mania is going, the FOMO, because you will draw to the downside in these corrections. So hopefully that's been helpful. If you like this video, I'd love for you to go and check out some of my other videos. I've done some stuff on altcoin strategy, tax, ETFs, strategy, different altcoin sectors I'm looking at. Head over and check those out, and I'd love for you to leave me subscribe if you enjoyed this video, or leave me some feedback in the comments, and I'll see you on the next video. Thanks, guys.